A free bird leaps on the back of the wind and floats downstream till the current ends and dips his wing in the orange sun rays and dares to claim the sky. But a bird that stalks down his narrow cage can seldom see through his bars of rage. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. The caged bird sings with a fearful trill of things unknown but longed for still, and his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom. The free bird thinks of another breeze, and the trade winds soft through the sighing trees, and the fat worms waiting on a dawn-bright lawn, and he names the sky his own. But a caged bird stands on the grave of dreams. His shadow shouts on a nightmare scream. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. The caged bird sings with a fearful trill of things unknown but longed for still, and his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom. I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings was written by the late U.S. Poet Laureate Maya Angelou. And in the connection of bird and her life, it seems almost certain of what she sings. The motivation of the caged bird in singing seems obvious. It sings because it yearns for freedom. And while there are many things that cage you and me in, Jesus, who died on the cross for us, yearns for you to be set free. The implication of this poem is that the free bird is so busy living their life that they don't have time to sing. And the caged bird, on the other hand, sings constantly because there's nothing else to do. We who sit this day in some position of privilege, on this weekend when our country celebrates its freedom, we are too often so busy that we fail to appreciate or act on the freedom that we have been given by Christ. Someone who has never experienced exile from Jerusalem like the Israelites, from a home like a child whose parents have kicked them out, or someone confined to a nursing home. Someone who has not experienced these things takes their freedom for granted. Someone who has never experienced oppression from the empire like the early Christians, or because of your race or your creed or the color of your skin or your age or your gender or orientation. Someone who has never experienced these things takes their freedom for granted. Someone who has never experienced slavery, like those caught in human trafficking, or Africans in the early history of our country, or people today experiencing the disease of addiction. Someone who has never experienced these things takes their freedom for granted. Today, like in our past, this present that you and I share is a time when we are too busy living our lives to notice, to celebrate, or to sing about our freedom. And for some, living under exile, oppression, or slavery, singing is the only way to escape, even if it is just a fleeting moment. And while chained in their circumstances, they are the folks among us for whom freedom is all they can think about. Our epistle today, as we heard, comes near the conclusion of Paul's letter to the church in Galatia. It was composed in the early 50s, and I mean the early 50s, not the 1950s. But it includes contradictory messages that we Christians are to bear one another's burdens and we must carry our own loads all at the same time. And we who long for the 1950s in the midst of our complex world carry conflicting burdens and hopes and dreams. But Paul believed in the imminent return of Jesus. They were awaiting Christ, and so Christian freedom in this letter to the early church is described ironically as the law of Christ. But this law is not found in Hebrew Scripture. It's not in Torah. The law is hanging before us this day. The law is the cross of Christ and the new creation that comes for you and me, new life born each day, washed anew in the waters of baptism. It has nothing to do by following the layer upon layer of religious law. That cross frees us from the bondage of sin and even the finality of death itself. And it leaves us this day wondering, now that you are free, in what do you put your trust? How do you, with the freedom that has been given to you by Jesus, choose to live this day? For where you spend your time and your talent and your money, you know the reading probably, is where your heart will be also. These free choices that you make today and each day show God and others what and whom you worship. These free choices you make are, in fact, your God. These free choices that you make are the gods to which you turn in times of trouble. Think about where you turn in times of trouble. To drugs, alcohol, food, sex, shopping, television, being a couch potato, getting away, running away, going out to the camp or to the cottage or the lake house or on some exotic vacation, locking yourself away, unplugging the phone and all the devices, or any number of things. None of these are necessarily bad in moderation. But when we worship them, they become idols. The first commandment reminds us that to have a God means that you expect to receive all good things from it. And in turn, you turn to it in all times of trouble. Yes, to have a God means to trust and to believe in God with your whole heart. But only trust and faith of the heart can make either God or idol in your life. So what gives you all good things? What makes your heart sing? Clearly, we live in a country where money is our primary god. This is not a new god. Cultures throughout all time and place have worshiped this god. We turn to wealth to deliver all good things to us because in our culture, wealth, success, power, and privilege, those are the things in which we put our hope. Those are the treasures in the fields of our lives that we go out seeking. Those are the treasures in the fields in which we sacrifice all else. And those are the very things that trap and imprison you and me. So there's an old story, and some of you know it. Some of you who have taught have probably shared it. But imagine, if you will, this morning on this very busy weekend here in Wolfboro, that there is a teacher walking with their student downtown. And Main Street is pretty noisy this time of year, and suddenly the teacher pauses and says to the student, "Did you hear that? Did you hear that cricket?" And the student says, "No way. How could you possibly hear a cricket with all of these people and all of this noise?" And the teacher walks over to a planter and pulls the cricket out. And the student says, wow, how did you do that? And the teacher says, you hear what you listen for. You find what you seek. And the student says, I don't believe it. So the teacher reaches into their pocket for a bunch of coins and throws them on the sidewalk in front of blacks, and everybody stops. And they turn and they look for where the sound of that money came from. And the teacher says, see? People hear what they are looking for. We find what we seek. Beloveds, being part of the Jesus movement means that we follow him by putting our confidence and trust in faith, not in money, not in our privilege, not in our work ethic, not in our own self-righteousness. It means living into the freedom that we've been given by that cross. It means trusting God with our entire being and then using that freedom to love and to serve our neighbor. That's what Paul's confession and encouragement to the Galatians is all about. That it is love that is the fulfillment of all of the law. When we trust and when we live into that freedom that we have been so graciously blessed with, we trust and share that love of Jesus because we can't help it. It overflows from us. Because like that old gospel hymn, we sing with our very lives. I sing because I'm happy. I sing because I'm free. For his eye is on the sparrow. And I know he watches over me.